Tim. Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. Today, we have an incredible array from time only to multi-complications, and of course, as usual, everything is for sale. Names, references, and when possible, prices in the description, but there are a few pieces we have here that are not listed on our website and do not have prices. So for those, you're going to want to email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. That is in fact your email for your questions about buying any watch you see here, pricing, accessories, conditions, ask for extra photos. We love all of it. And of course, we're going to start out with the leading name in luxury watches, the one that transcends the industry, but in a form we rarely see. The most traditional of Rolex sports watches is the Oyster Perpetual. It's debatable whether it's really even a sports watch, but as the original, born in the 1930s, combined many sports watch features, we may as well call it the charter member of the Rolex canon. And of course, the Oyster Perpetual combined two things: the Rolex water-resistant Oyster case and its screw-down crown, and the Perpetual automatic winding system. Those two features, introduced in the 20s and 30s respectively, combined to create the first bubble back, so named because it featured a pronounced bubble-like case designed to accommodate the winding rotor. This is the 116000, the classical 36mm Oyster Perpetual in stainless steel. Now the watch uses a red grape dial, and that's not my term, that's Rolex's term. You may not expect something this extravagant, or I might say slightly humorous from Rolex, but at the same time, this grape is a delicious blend. As you can see, a combination of metallic sunburst, and then outboard there are highlighted Arabic numerals. It's an unusual look with a ton of character, right down to the double indices at 3, 6, and 9. An easy watch to wear as well. This is the point of entry into Rolex ownership for a lot of people. With a base price below $6,000 and the same Rolex authenticity, precision, durability, and enduring style, this is a timepiece that will never succumb to planned obsolescence. In fact, it will look just as good in the now unnervingly close 2030s when the Oyster Perpetual line will turn 100. 48-hour power reserve, automatic winding, 100 meters water resistant, and fully loomed. 36 millimeters, though it wears more like a 38 because of the cushion profile that is the Rolex Oyster. Gerald Genta was once asked, which watch do you most regret having not designed? His answer, the Rolex Oyster. Now we're gonna step up in size, a larger Oyster case, 40 millimeters. We're going back to the Y series in the early 2000s, and the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Explorer II. This is the reference 16570. As you can see, a handsome and lovely pre-super case Explorer II, because the watch changed so much. With the 42 millimeter model in 2011, many find that their passion for the model line ends with the original 5-digit reference independent time zone Explorer II. Now, when the first Explorer II bowed back in 1971, it was much like the GMT Master in that it had a 24-hour hand and a 12-hour hand, and the two were linked together, so they'd always effectively display the same time. But in the early 1980s, with the 16550, we got two independent time zones, and that continued into the 16570. Now, this being a Y series watch, it was built with a Luminova dial. It was built with a 78790 solid end-link bracelet, and of course, being a relatively recent watch, it still wears the way Rolex intended: precise, durable, luminescent, and water-resistant down to 100 meters. So this, no longer a Cave Explorer's watch, is in many regards a undercover alternative to the better-known GMT Masters. This timepiece cuts a lower profile. It's more of a Rolex connoisseur's watch, well known to fans of the brand, but not necessarily a giant flying middle finger to the world at large, as Rolex iconic models like the Daytona, the GMT, and the Submariner often can be. So it's likely to draw less attention, except from the right folks, the folks who are into Rolex, and that's the beauty of the 16570. I should say, my uncle has a wonderful story about his Rolex Explorer II. He had a bit part in The Natural playing a catcher, and he took his paycheck from the movie and he went out and he bought an Explorer II in the middle of the 80s. So that's my personal Rolex Explorer II tale. He still has the watch, in fact, and we saw what Rolex insured it for when they sent it back from service. He was a bit shocked. Put it this way, it was more than his paycheck for the film. Now jump into my personal favorite Rolex watch. This is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Milgauss, reference 116400 GV, but it's more than the GV. As the GV bowed with the orange hands and the green crystal in 2007, but the Z blue with this electrifying ion-inspired Blue Sunburst. This arrived in 2014. Look at the colors: silver, green, orange, blue, and then the key lime of the lume itself. This is probably the most cheerful watch Rolex has ever made. Yes, more than Red Grape, which is why this 40mm anti-magnetic tank is my favorite Rolex timepiece. It's also nice and compact, as its lug-to-lug and end link profile is almost identical. You can see how the end links don't project beyond the case, and at 50mm, that makes the watch a good size for a smaller wrist. You'll also like the fact that it cuts a lower profile than a rotating bezel Rolex sports watch. While it remains part of the core of the Rolex sports watch family, the original Milgauss, launched in 1955, actually early 1956, late 55. It was designed for those who worked around high-powered electronics in the budding microelectronics and consumer electronics, research electronics, and military-industrial electronics field. And this watch was designed to resist 1,000 Gauss or Milgauss. Now that's not a whole lot of anti-magnetic resistance by modern standards, so Rolex went above and beyond with this watch. It still has the original soft iron paramagnetic inner cage to channel field lines around the movement, but it has something else. It has a niobium zirconium blue oxidized hairspring, and remember the 500,000 ampere per meter IWC Ingenieur from the 80s? That also used a niobium zirconium hairspring. So I suspect this watch is not just Milgauss, but many Milgauss. 100 meters water resistant and fully lumed, this is the most cheerful Rolex, and my first Rolex to be. That said, we got an extravagant and unexpected guest from Rolex last year, and that was the 126603 two-tone Sea-Dweller 43. An unusual and, again, somewhat surprising combination of yellow gold and stainless steel in the 43mm case. This timepiece combines the famed helium escape valve for you saturation divers with the Sea-Dweller's traditional virtues of durability and precision. Now, it features a wonderful bezel detent. Let's hear it against the mic. I don't know how Rolex does it, but it manages to be the only dive bezel that is both crisp and creamy at the same time. Ceramic insert with yellow gold deposits to define the indices and the numerals, so it's a combination of ceramic and gold. You also have a solid gold bezel base, and then when you throw the watch on the wrist, we'll take a quick look at the inside of the clasp. You can see it uses a glide lock system like the Submariner, so you have the ability, get out of the way surly tag, you have the ability to make adjustments in its size by using the slider, and that internal slider gives you 20mm of adjustability in 2mm increments. Throw the watch on the wrist. It's not as thick as the Deep Sea, which is why many consider this to be more of an everyday watch than its juggernaut big brother. The timepiece on my wrist, of course, has a wonderful warmth and tropical cool to it. I know, warm and cool at the same time, how's that possible? Well, the gold is hot and the look is chill. As you can see on the wrist, it's not so broad that I couldn't wear it on a 16cm circumference wrist, and the timepiece does feature a 3-day power reserve, so it has all the modern Rolex refinements. It is an unusual look and a low volume model, something designed because a few folks at Rolex thought, hey, wouldn't it be neat? Proving not only does Rolex have a willingness to take risks, but somewhere inside the labyrinth there are folks with soul who do things because they are fun. Now, jumping to the world of strap watches, let's talk about one that's even more extravagant than that Rolex. Let's talk about what must be one of the only reference TJ Tourbillon Souverain in the world. Now, this is the FP Journe Tourbillon Souverain 40mm in platinum, diamond paved. Black polished white gold dial paved with brilliant cut diamonds, diamond paved lugs, diamond paved bezel, diamond paved case band. You can barely see the metal. All of this set with minimal visibility about the settings themselves. So you see the metal boundaries, but you don't see little pincers holding the gems in place Rolex style. This is an incredibly clean, iced out look. If you want all the mech, you want the tech, but as much as you love the spec, you also like to style. This is a watch that gives you that, with the same combination of a tourbillon on the dial, the deadbeat seconds, the remontoire d'égalité, and the power reserve indicator on the dial, 18-karat rose gold movement, platinum case, diamond paved. Once again, this is a watch that features the same level of precision, with the remontoire indexing the deadbeat 1 second every second, giving a constant supply of torque to the escapement so that you maintain constant amplitude for approximately 30 hours of the power reserve of the watch. It will run for about 40 to 42, but wind it daily, and thanks to the remontoir, this watch, which represented a world premiere for Journe back in 1999, combining the remontoir and the tourbillon, it can maintain ideal timekeeping and identical amplitude for 30 hours. It's not just about the gems, although, make no mistake, they help. How many of these exist? No more than a few dozen, and that spread over years of production. Now, sticking with our haute de gamme theme, let's talk about Patek Philippe and a watch that's probably a little bit more up your alley and mine. You need one hell of a personal style to pull off that Journe with a straight face, but the sector dial white gold annual calendar 5396G has to be one of the most roundly crowd-pleasing Patek Philippe watches not penned by Genta. With the blended lugs, the center seconds, the sector style dial featuring not just the blue sectors but also two different silvers, a silver gray at the center and a silver white for the track. This is a very charismatic watch featuring the historic Patek Philippe aperture style calendar. We recognize that, of course, from the Perpetual calendars of the 1940s and 50s at Patek, but what we also appreciate is the beautiful balance of this dial. As it has bilateral symmetry, you can split it down the center and it's symmetrical on both sides. Moon phase, you have the date, you have the day, you have the month, and it need be adjusted only once a year during the jump from February to March. That's what makes it an annual calendar. This watch, a discontinued reference with the sector dial, features a beautifully finished automatic caliber 324, handsome Gyromax style, free-sprung balance, immaculately hand-finished, 38 to 48 hour, I should say 35 to 45 hour power reserve. 38 to 48 is the 240. It's a great looking movement, so when you buy this watch, you better also buy a loop. It will be well worth your while. That said, sometimes darkness calls. Get the Hellboy reference there? I hope someone did. And if you want a timepiece that wears with panache, but also durability, the 2013 Baselworld Star Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch Dark Side of the Moon remains an absolute horological UFO, fitting for a timepiece that is Cosmos themed. On the wrist, it looks like nothing else as the gloss and the gleam of the black ceramic dial, the black ceramic tack, and the full black ceramic case set it apart from merely black PVD watches. The case is feather light in ceramic and sapphire with almost complete immunity to scratching, such that it's difficult to tell the difference between one of the original 2013 watches and a new one coming out of BN today from Omega. These watches just don't age. Unless you do something profoundly violent that's likely to leave you with wrist injuries along the way, these watches generally don't scratch, scuff, chip, or in any way show the evidence of wear and tear. And if, like me, you've grown weary of scratches during your times in the watch hobby, you're gonna love this watch. 44.25 millimeters in black ceramic. Because of the 50 millimeter lug-to-lug span, it's not broad across the wrist. If you can wear a standard 42 millimeter Moonwatch on a bracelet, you can wear this. On my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see it's not overly broad, though it's not particularly thin. It will fit underneath a jacket cuff. The watch is chock-a-block with features and functions. As you can see, there's a mono counter over at 3 o'clock for chronograph hours and minutes, so that you have this handsome vintage-inspired bi-register design with a tri-register chronograph. Now, when you pull the crown out, let me see, I don't have the best nails these days, you can adjust the minute hand, or the hour hand, I should say, independently. And you can see how I can drive the date in either direction, and I can do all this while the minute hand stays stationary, constant seconds continues to move, and the watch, chronograph-wise, continues to keep time. White gold indices and hands on the dial because this is a flagship Omega reference. You have a solid gold movement, figuratively, on the case back with caliber 9300. Twin mainspring barrels. It doesn't have the drop-off after 24 hours or 48 hours that a one-barrel watch will have in amplitude. So it maintains its amplitude. It has a 60-hour power reserve. It also has a combination of a vertical clutch and a column wheel, and you can actually see the column wheel jumping underneath its bridge. So you get to see the works. The column wheel makes the actuation crisp. The vertical clutch ensures that if you want to leave your chronograph running full time, so you have hours, minutes, and seconds, you can do that. Just ignore the other registers, you can have center seconds. But because it's a vertical clutch, it also allows smooth engagement without any jump or stagger to the seconds hand. This is a timepiece that offers just about everything you could want. If you love the black watch look, but you can't stand the scratches of PVD, and you want a time-tested design, this watch, now in its 8th model year, is one of the best in the business and a modern classic from Omega. But if we were to turn back the clock to 1969, Omega was ready to ring in the 70s with what it suspected would be a successor to the decorated and NASA-flown Speedmaster Moonwatch. Well, the Speedmaster Professional Mark II didn't replace the Moonwatch, but it is a lovely moment-in-time kind of watch that captures the spirit of the era, while at the same time giving us a wonderful period play when we're wearing a vintage timepiece. As you can see, you've got a tonneau-style case that is approximately 42 millimeters wide by 45 millimeters lug-to-lug, meaning it's broad, but it wears short across the wrist. You have a mineral crystal over a tritium dial. The tachometer is actually printed on the underside of the crystal. The dial is unmarked, unmarred. There's no evidence of contact, oxidation, or contamination. And as you can see, the hands are also tritium to match the dial, so they're perfectly paired. The sharpness of the case is unlike anything I've seen outside of the Omega Museum. As you can see, this is next level with the bevels completely intact, the satin finishing on the top of the case completely intact with evidence of having been worn. It's not a museum piece, but it appears to have never been refinished. So you can see that the sharpness of the bevels and the caseband remain undimmed by the years. It shines just as brightly. With a Moonwatch caliber inside, the watch, which is powered by caliber 861, remains technically identical to the conventional 145022 from the same era. 48-hour power reserve, manual wind, cam lateral clutch. This is the Moonwatch caliber that, as the 1861 continues to fly with NASA today. So this watch giving you a lot of historical cred. 70s style design, albeit designed in the 60s, it was of the 70s, and then a Moonwatch movement on the inside. It's got heart and it's got soul. Let's talk about a watch that's got a little bit of both, that hails from the same year, or at least indirectly, because 1969 was the first year for the Zenith El Primero. And the Zenith El Primero, as you see it in my hand, is a wearable and enduring full open dial that reads just as easily as a solid dial. You can see it features the tritone registers of the original A385, A384, and you can see the watch has the same 38mm case that many connoisseurs believe is preferable to the 42 Chronomaster case of the modern era. So the 38 wears universally, and you'll appreciate that the dial is nuanced with the silver gray of the movement underneath, a lighter silver white for the chaptering outboard for chronograph seconds, minutes, and fractions of a second, and then you have these steel rhodium-plated, diamond-polished, cantilevered applique indices, each one loomed, so this watch reads easily in the dark. Now, being an El Primero, it's powered by a 10 beat per second, caliber 400 here. This is the 31 joule standard El Primero. Automatic winding, 52-hour power reserve. It is a column wheel and a lateral clutch, and it, of course, beats away at 10 beats per second. The 10 beat per second operation, let me see if I can show you the column wheel, meaning that the chronograph seconds hand sweeps smoother than a conventional 8 beat per second or 4 Hertz chronograph. So this is a 5 Hertz movement. Now you can see the column wheel and the lateral clutch engaging, disengaging, and thanks to the column wheel, it is very sharp. For those who might be new to the El Primero movement, it launched in 1969 as the first fully integrated, that is non-modular, automatic high-beat chronograph caliber. And while its contemporaries, the caliber 11 from Heuer and the 6139 from Seiko, have fallen by the wayside, the El Primero remains in production today, and notably, during the 1990s and late 1980s, this movement was used modified by Rolex in the Cosmograph Daytona. So it has some impressive feathers in its cap. Throw it on the wrist, and as I mentioned, the 38 is more universally agreeable than the 42. While many can and do enjoy the 42, all can and will enjoy the 38. In stainless steel, this is a handsome all-arounder that can be worn under any circumstances, and it's one of the few modern full open dial watches from LVMH that I think is actually destined to stand the test of time. I have quite a few questions about Hublot and tag, but Zenith tends to do these a little bit better, both in terms of style and legibility. Now, speaking of watches that represent outstanding style, dials that have miles of style, as with the Chronomaster, this is no open dial, but this is the most impressive German watch dial of 2019, a one-year special with what's known as the Degrade pattern. This is the Glashütte Original Vintage 60s Pano date. So you have the double-digit date, the Panorama datum, of course, 2 discs. So when you make adjustments, you can see how one disc moves independently of the other. You then have a dial that is first stamped by a multi-ton press and then varnished,
then galvanized, then varnished in multiple steps to create what you see here, which is a fade from a sort of tangerine at its center to black at its edge. Because it is stamped, it has both an embossed texture and a camber. That is, the dial itself has a domed profile that nicely matches the domed cambered sapphire. Because it is inspired by the 60s, you have a 60s style font, 60 style baton hands, and then that 60 style plexiglass looking sapphire. What you can't quite see is that the indices on the dial, and I'm trying to show you that here, but they are actually concave. They are cut into the dial with their bases then black polished. So these indices aren't simply printed. They're not appliqué, they are actually negative, etched deep into the dial and then black polished like a mirror on their interior. You've got a caliber 39 base on the reverse side with some German style, a double spiral to the reduction wheel for the automatic system, Glashütte stripes, a 3/4 style bridge to remind us of the pocket watch era in Saxony, and then you have a black polished swan's neck regulator on top of the balance. Quick set date, hacking seconds, automatic winding 40-hour power reserve. The watch is a 42mm stainless steel all-arounder. It is loomed, so you can read it at night. This is a handsome, sporty, and fun-loving watch, a bit like the Rolex Z Blue. This one's so outlandish that it stands out, but it does so with impeccable good manners to be welcome, even exalted in any company. A truly special men's all-arounder. You can call it a dress watch, but it's got too much of a wry smile on its dial to strictly pigeonhole it as a formal timepiece. Now, entering the realm of true formality, let's talk a little bit about Roger Dubuis. Founded in the mid-1990s, originally as SOGEM, an acronym that essentially described it as a watchmaker out of Geneva, the company was later renamed after its guiding light, Roger Dubuis. A longtime Longines and Patek Philippe watchmaker, he specialized in complications with Patek Philippe and later had a hand in starting the original Harry Winston rare timepieces collection in the late 80s. What you're looking at here is a second generation Roger Dubuis Sympathie 40. It features the Sympathie case, which was invented by a Vallée de Joux case maker. It has a lovely drawn, pointed, and fluid form, but the second generation features a round sapphire to match a round dial. Why? Because it was almost impossible to make the originals water resistant. There's always a trade-off. Lovely and extravagant, metallic coated quarter Arabic numerals. You can see the font is a first quarter 20th century design that celebrates early Swiss watchmaking in the wristwatch idiom. You'll also note rose gold hands, rose gold applique indices, and then lovely sector style hour and minutes track outboard that. You'll also note that it says Bulletin d'Observatoire. That means it is a Besançon observatory chronometer tested as a fully cased up watch at the French observatory in Besançon on top of a mountain. This is a French chronometer. It's also Geneva hallmark. You get both. This is Roger Dubuis caliber 57. It is a Breguet 8815 or Longines L990, depending on which lineage you want to cite, and it has been finished to Geneva hallmark standards. And while most movements these days feature polished screws, Côte de Genève, beveling, and engine turning, the difference between all of those things applied manually and all of those things applied by mass production and machine is immense, and God is in the details here. This is a Geneva hallmark French observatory chronometer, excruciatingly hand-finished and beautifully made. You'll note a limited edition of 28 pieces, so the likelihood of seeing another one is about as rare as hen's teeth on a rooster. On the wrist, it actually has a tremendous amount of presence for a 40, as the long straight lugs with screwed bars give it the presence of almost a 42 or a 43. To its credit, it is very flat and flush, so it'll fit under a cuff, but if you look how tall it is on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see why I might say stay away if your wrist is smaller than 15 centimeters. If you're looking for a 40 with impeccable pedigree, a wonderful example of independent horology, a modern classic, and a borderline vintage option, all featuring chronometer status, a link to a great watchmaker, and of course Geneva hallmark finishing, you don't have many options. If you want one of just 28, well, this might be the only game in town. Red gold, of course, with glorious case finishing. You can see that the bezel itself, which matches the shape of the case, is all of high polish, and then the mid case features a lovely vertical satin grain, and again, screws and bars, not spring bars, fixing this strap to the case.
Continuing with our fine finish, we stray back into Deutschland, and from the fatherland, we have perhaps the ultimate
3-hand, and a date. This is the 37mm white gold Lange Sohne Langematik. Quite simply, 37mm, a reference line to 1997, ended in 2007, and the Panorama datum, or the big date. The watch features a pusher adjuster, and I will demonstrate that, for the date that gives you the same crisp feel as a column wheel chronograph. And the dial, of course, featuring a combination of white gold indices and hands and a black galvanized sterling silver base. That is right, the dial is made of sterling silver, the case is made of white gold. The movement is the L092, also known as the Saxomat. Now it's special for 2 reasons. One, it's a micro rotor, or precisely a 3/4 style rotor. So you get the slender profile and open caseback vista of a manual, but you get the convenience of an automatic and 46-hour power reserve. Now, if you look at the rotor, we'll get super close here. By the way, it's not just the rotor that will astound. Everything about this movement is superlative. But you'll note that the rotor is engraved and it is made of solid gold. The mass that actually provides the inertia, that is made of platinum. So it's a platinum and gold rotor. And of course, you have Glashütte stripes, freehand engraving. You have a wonderful satination underneath the rotor, and then perlage underneath the balance with mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges, black polish for some screws, blued screws for others, and of course the black polished swan's neck on top of the freehand engraved half bridge for the balance. Throw it on the wrist, and in 37mm, anyone can wear this watch. It's comfy, it's close coupled, and as you can see, the lugs are short across the wrist, making this watch appropriate for a wrist as small as 13 centimeters circumference, meaning if you love yourself some German watchmaking, but maybe you don't like big watches or you have a smaller wrist, this is a great option. It's also a viable unisex option, and the Saxomat has one of the world's slickest zero reset hacking systems, as when you pull the crown, you reset and immediately index the seconds hand to 0 so you can set more easily against a reference time.
Continuing our journey through Saxony, some prefer the warmth of rose gold and a slightly larger case. Though no thicker, this 40mm Lange Sohne 1815 gives us the hallmark of the 1815 family. Stick indices like you just saw, Saxonia family. Roman numerals, Richard Lange. Arabic numerals, as here, it must be the 1815s. 40mm in rose gold, you can see the watch is thin. Caliber L051 through the back, manual wind, big broad 3/4 style bridge with the jeweled chaton for the drivetrain. You can see that this is classical pocket watch style watchmaking, and as a result it really does reference those original Lange Sohne pocket watches of the 19th century and early 20th century. Of course, the modern Lange Sohne, a recreation of the original company, founded in 1990. It began making its first watches in 1994, and a lot of what we consider today to be German watchmaking movement style, all of that was pioneered by Lange Sohne in the 90s and universally adopted by brands as disparate as Nomos and Glashütte Original. And this timepiece, being 40mm in rose gold with a sterling silver dial, is a classical 3-hand dress watch in German style. It's Teutonic, it's sober, it's a little bit stolid, but make no mistake, the richness is unmistakable, as this is a timepiece that includes grace in every detail, front and back. Now, sometimes Lange is not so reserved, and while the Germans can certainly be understated, they can also go crazy. I cite every BMW M car, every Mercedes AMG, the Weissmann Roadsters, and of course the Audi RSs, in which I have broken countless United States laws. That said, none can compare to this 2013 launch, the Lange Sohne 1815 Rattrapante Perpetual calendar, an extraordinary movement with over 630 parts inside a 41.9mm case. The timepiece is amazing. It has a silver dial, a rose gold case, a solid gold moon phase disc, and as you can see, it features all of the functions you would want if you were timing 2 concurrent events and also keeping track of the Gregorian calendar. So with the split-second functionality, I am able to time 2 separate events that are occurring simultaneously. For example, a race around a track between an AMG Benz and an Audi RS, and I can gauge as each crosses the stop-finish line over and over whether the gap between them is waxing or waning. As a matter of fact,
I also have the ability to judge the correct date. Leap years and irregular length months be damned. And as you can see, the dial has exceptional depth with dished registers and a separate scale or ray outboard that adds another focal plane for the eyes. Moreover, this timepiece, though large, is by no means outrageously huge. At about 42 millimeters, the timepiece is substantial. That said, you're not going to look cartoonishly out of proportion if you wear it on a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. And of course, as with any Lange Sohne timepiece, the case back is half the pleasure. Maybe more than half the pleasure. As you can see, caliber L1011 with its over 600 pieces is a jaw dropper. Now you'll appreciate the fact that it includes, let's make sure it's ticking right here, but it includes a separate center bridge and column wheel for actuating the split seconds mechanism and a rare decoupling system that ensures the stopped second will not drag the rest of the chronograph movement and slow down the watch when that 1 second is temporarily frozen. And because of the decoupler, this ranks in the upper echelon of split-second chronograph refinement, one of very few watches ever made that include that feature. Satin finish, black polish, Côte de Genève or Glashütte stripes. You have blued screws, black screws, satin steel, mirrored bevels, all of that. And you even have a jewel set in a screw-fixed chaton, Lange style, one on the center bridge and one flanking. A gloriously good-looking movement. Let me see if I can get a little bit even closer even. Andrew's helping me out on camera and he's doing a great job there. What's your favorite part? I like all 631 of them, but my favorite part is when I get to put it on the wrist. Note, a full deployant clasp. This is no poor man's reductive special. The watch is as rich at the extremity as it is at its core, with a full gold clasp rather than Lange's conventional pin buckle.
Only one step down in the Lange pecking order sits a watch launched in 2006, building on the legendary 1999 Datograph. The 2006 Datograph Perpetual took everything to the next level with a combination of perpetual calendar and flyback chronograph. While the 1815 you just saw is a split-second chronograph, it is not able to do this. Jump back and restart with a single press of the reset trigger at 4 o'clock. Now this is a smart watch, as when you pull out the crown and you use the indexing trigger that normally indexes the date on a standard Datograph, here, when you pull out the crown into its intermediate position and press this trigger, you advance all of the indications of the perpetual calendar in sync. So if this watch runs down, and you let it sit for 2 weeks, you pull out the crown and you push this trigger 14 times and everything in coordinated fashion moves back up to the correct day, date, month, leap year, moon phase, all of that. As with the others, you have white gold hands and indices, sterling silver dial, solid gold moon phase disc, this one in a platinum case, 40.9 millimeters, we're going to call it 41, and of course you get the legendary caliber L951. As beautiful as the 1815 in its way, this one is more focused as it includes a chronograph mechanism with both lateral clutch and column wheel, but it doesn't feature the etcetterini associated with the central bridge, the second column wheel, and the split seconds mechanism, meaning that though this is more focused, in many regards, it's also more appealing to the eye, as it's not quite as crowded. And make no mistake, Lange focused heavily on the aesthetics of the movement, not just the finish, but the location and the proportion of the parts. Interior angles, black polish, mirrored bevels, you got it all. And of course, there's that enormous freehand engraved bridge for the balance, the half bridge. Overcoil hairspring, this beats away at a pocket watch like 18,000 vibrations per hour. Throw it on the wrist. I can tell you, a 41 in platinum from Lange feels like a hell of a lot of watch. It is a big watch. It's not oppressively thick, and you can see with a domed bezel, it will slide under a cuff. This is a very special watch. This is a timepiece that will make you rethink your infatuation with the name Patek Philippe or the local hype, and I mean local to our time frame, of FP Journe. Those brands are hot now, but if you want the best value in pre-owned watches, there is only one game in town. It's the folks from Saxony. It is a Lange Sohne. This is the way to go. Don't even bother with something like a Patek 5170. For the same money, go straight for this. This is a special and soulful watch. You will not regret its company one day. That is one of those no regrets purchases. Now, if you're a no regrets type, you throw caution to the wind and you must have the ultimate. There is one name in independent horology that stands shoulder to shoulder with Philippe Dufour. If you want the finest in finish, and you want a lot more of it than Philippe has ever lavished on a wristwatch, then you want the folks in La Chaux de Fonds. 100 workers, 100 watches a year from Greubel Forsey. This is the Greubel Forsey Tourbillon 24-second. Start to wind it, 3-day power reserve, and suddenly that 24-second tourbillon inclined at 25 degrees jumps to attention. And yes, you heard me right. This is a 24-second tourbillon, whereas conventional tourbillon regulators make 1 pirouette per minute. This one makes more than 2. Let's get super close. You could see that glorious balance beaten away at 21,600 vibrations per hour and angled, because on the wrist, 25 degrees approximates the most common angle. If you average all angles a movement will experience on the wrist. So the incline ensures that even though this is a wristwatch tourbillon, it has much of the same historic benefits as a pocket watch tourbillon. And Greubel Forsey is multiply decorated in independent chronometry trials, justifying and validating its research on wristwatch tourbillon. You'll also appreciate the fact that the bridge here is entirely rounded and black polished. Black polish is hard to execute on a flat surface. On a completely rounded surface, only the best can achieve the effect. You'll also note that there is a window in the flank of the case, so you can better appreciate your tourbillon regulator from every conceivable angle. The case, 43.5 millimeters, includes a number of flourishes, including a solid gold set of hands indices, power reserve scale for the 3-day reserve de marche, and when you turn it over, as with Lange, pocket watch finishing tradition, but on a nightmare scale. Enormous German silver bridges that are frosted and chiseled. Handsome anglage, featuring front and back, perhaps a dozen interior angles. Let me see if I can show you the mirrored bevels, really get them lit. You could see that the edges of these bridges are not just beveled, but that the bevels themselves are huge. The blued screws are huge, and the jewels are set in giant golden chaton, meaning that you are getting your money's worth, the finest level of finish money can buy. Others can equal, but none truly exceed Greubel Forsey. And 43.5 millimeters in white gold. It's the shape of the lugs that allows this watch to wear so well on a small wrist, to the point that even if your wrist is 15 centimeters circumference, you're going to wear this watch conspicuously, but comfortably and securely. And if I could give Greubel a shout out for something that's rarely mentioned, it's the profile of these lugs. As you can see, they're mirror polished, but they're also concave, and that's more evident when you view them from overhead. These concave profiles, it makes sure that there's almost a bowl-like reflective quality to the flank of the case, and it does incredible things, scattering light in a flame-like effect. You'll also note that there is a satin-finished mid-case for contrast. The casework of Greubel Forsey is as good as any in the industry, and for this, I would actually say they are underrated. Full deployant clasp naturally to ensure this thing remains firmly anchored on your wrist. It also has a rather vocal escapement. Let me see if I can hold it against my mic. It sings its siren song to me. Will it sing to thee? Guys, everything that you saw on the table today is for sale, though some of the stuff is not on our website, so this is your only avenue. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Even if you've just got casual conversations about purchase, this is your shopping network program for YouTube. What can I say? I don't have the endurance of QVC, but believe it or not, I shot this episode and the previous Wednesday episode back to back. So I've been doing this for about 2 hours, and I have not lost my enthusiasm as long as the watches are this good, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to you. Thanks to Andrew on the camera, Sean on the switcher, Time Out, Tim Out. Have a great weekend, and thanks for logging on.